Today is the 9th of September 2010, and this is the 51st time we're speaking on the Samyutta, in the Majjhima Nikāya Suttas. Now we come to Sutta number 123, Acchariya abbhuta Sutta, wonderful and marvelous. I consider this as one of the least important suttas in the Majjhima Nikāya, so hopefully we can go through it fast. Thus I heard, on one occasion the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. Now a number of monks were sitting in the assembly hall where they had met together on returning from their alms round after their meal, when this discussion arose among them. It is wonderful, friends, it is marvelous how mighty and powerful is the Tathagata, or is able to know about the Buddhas of the past, who attained to final Nibbana, cut the tangle of proliferation, broke the cycle, ended the round, and surmounted all suffering. That for those blessed ones, their birth was thus, their names were thus, their clans were thus, their virtue was thus, their state of concentration was thus, their wisdom was thus, their abiding in attainments was thus, their liberation was thus. When this was said, the Venerable Ananda told the monks, friends, Tathagatas are wonderful and have wonderful qualities. Tathagatas are marvelous and have marvelous qualities. However, their discussion was interrupted, for the Blessed One rose from meditation when it was evening, went to the assembly hall and sat down on a seat made ready. Then he addressed the monks thus, Monks, for what discussion are you sitting together here now? And what was your discussion that was interrupted? Here, Venerable Sir, we were sitting in the assembly hall where we had met together on returning from our alms round after our meal. And this discussion arose among us. It is wonderful, friends, it is marvelous. How mighty and powerful is the Tathagata, etc. When this was said, Venerable Sir, the Venerable Ananda said to us, friends, Tathagatas are wonderful and have wonderful qualities. Tathagatas are marvelous and have marvelous qualities. This was our discussion, Venerable Sir, that was interrupted when the Blessed One arrived. Then the Blessed One addressed the Venerable Ananda. That being so, Ananda, explain more fully the Tathagata's wonderful and marvelous qualities. Stop here for a moment. So, because Venerable Ananda said that all Buddhas, Tathagatas, are wonderful and have wonderful qualities, are marvelous and have marvelous qualities. So the Buddha asked him to explain more, and he said, I have heard and learned this, Venerable Sir, from the Blessed One's own lips. Mindful and aware, Ananda, the Bodhisattva appeared in the Tusita heaven. That mindful and fully aware, the Bodhisattva appeared in the Tusita heaven. This I remember as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Blessed One. I heard and learned this from the Blessed One's own lips. Mindful and fully aware, the Bodhisattva remained in the Tusita heaven. This too I remember as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Blessed One. I heard and learned this from the Blessed One's own lips. For the whole of his lifespan, the Bodhisattva remained in the Tusita heaven. This too I remember as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Blessed One. I heard and learned this from the Blessed One's own lips. Mindful and fully aware, the Bodhisattva passed away from the Tusita heaven and descended into his mother's womb. This too I remember as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Blessed One. Stop here for a moment. This paragraph number 3, the Bodhisattva appeared in the Tusita heaven. According to the commentaries, this was after his life as Vesantara. In the Vesantara Jataka, there's a story about the Bodhisattva who gave away his wife, gave away his 2 children to a heartless beggar who beat them because he wanted to perfect the parami of giving. But this I find it hard to accept because that Jataka story contradicts the Dhamma that the Buddha taught. The Buddha says, good or wise man's charity must not harm himself and must not harm others. So this story about the Vesantara Jataka, I think was cooked up by some later monks. It cannot be that the Buddha cultivated this parami of giving in that Jataka. In fact, all the Jataka stories you find are a bit far-fetched. Like animals being able to talk and all that, which is not possible. So all these Jataka stories were, folk tales, Indian folk tales that they incorporated into Buddhism. What we know from the sutta is that the Buddha in the past life was born as a Brahmin, Jotipala, at the time of the Buddha Kassapa. And in that lifetime, his good friend Gatikara brought him to meet the Buddha Kassapa. And after hearing the Dhamma, he renounced, became a monk, which indicates that he most likely had attained stream entry after hearing the Dhamma. And then after that, he practiced as a monk and attained at least the first jhana, because when he came back in his last life as Siddhartha Gautama, as a small boy, he could enter the first jhana under the Jambu tree. So from that time of Buddha Kassapa, he was reborn in the Tusita heaven. And after a long stay in the Tusita heaven, he came back as Siddhartha Gautama. So that is more likely what happened, not anything to do with the Vesantara Jataka. Then paragraph number 6, mindful and fully aware, the Bodhisattva passed away from the Tusita heaven and descended into his mother's womb. This we can accept because there is a sutta where the Buddha in the Anguttara Nikāya says there are 4 types of beings. One enters the womb unknowing, stays in the womb unknowing, and comes out unknowing. Another one enters the womb knowing, stays there unknowing, and comes out unknowing. The third one enters the womb knowing, stays there knowing, but comes out unknowing. The fourth one, the best, enters the womb knowing, stays there knowing, and comes out of the womb knowing. That means mindful all the time. So the Buddha said he belongs to the last category. So this one thing. The other thing you must notice from the paragraph 6 is that there is something that descends into the mother's womb. This we can call the soul. But of course, in the Buddha's teachings, the soul is different from the Christian soul. In the Buddha's teachings, the soul is just a bundle of energy, just like a human being is a bundle of energy. So the soul is also a bundle of energy. In the suttas, it's called a Gandhabba, that being that enters the womb. In other books, it's called the intermediate being, intermediate state of existence. In Chinese, we call Ling Hun, Ling Fan. Okay, and I come to paragraph 7. Here onwards, some of the things mentioned in this sutta, I find is a bit far-fetched, a bit hard to accept. Number 7. I heard and learned this from the Blessed One's own lips. When the Bodhisattva passed away from the Tusita heaven and descended into his mother's womb, then a great immeasurable light surpassing the splendor of the gods appeared in the world with its gods, its Maras and its Brahmas, in this generation with its recluses and Brahmins, with its princes and its people, and even in those abysmal world interspaces of vacancy, gloom and utter darkness, where the moon and sun, mighty and powerful as they are, cannot make their light prevail. There too a great immeasurable light surpassing the splendor of the gods appeared, and the beings born there perceive each other by that light. So other beings indeed have appeared here, and this 10,000-fold world system shook and quaked and trembled. And there too a great immeasurable light surpassing the splendor of the gods appeared. This too I remember as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Blessed One. I heard and learned this from the Blessed One's own lips. When the Bodhisattva had descended into his mother's womb, 4 young deities came to guard him at the 4 quarters. so that no humans or non-humans or anyone at all could harm the Bodhisattva or his mother. This too I remember as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Blessed One. I heard and learned this from the Blessed One's own lips. When the Bodhisattva had descended into his mother's womb, she became intrinsically virtuous, refraining from killing living beings, from taking what is not given, from misconduct in sensual pleasures, from false speech, and from wines, liquors, and intoxicants, which are the basis of negligence. This too I remember as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Blessed One. I heard and learned this from the Blessed One's own lips. When the Bodhisattva had descended into his mother's womb, no sensual thought arose in her concerning men, and she was inaccessible to any man having a lustful mind. This too I remember as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Blessed One. I heard and learned this from the Blessed One's own lips. When the Bodhisattva had descended into his mother's womb, she obtained the 5 chords of sensual pleasure, and furnished and endowed with them, she enjoyed herself with them. This too I remember as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Blessed One. I heard and learned this from the Blessed One's own lips. When the Bodhisattva had descended into his mother's womb, no kind of affliction arose in her. She was blissful and free from bodily fatigue. She saw the Bodhisattva within her womb with all his limbs, lacking no faculty. Suppose a blue, yellow, red, white, or brown thread was strung through a fine beryl gem of purest water, 8-faceted, well cut, and a man with good sight were to take it in his hand and review it thus. This is a fine beryl gem of purest water, 8-faceted, well cut, and through it is strung a blue, yellow, red, white, or brown thread. So too, when the Bodhisattva had descended into his mother's womb, no kind of affliction arose in her. She was blissful and free from bodily fatigue. She saw the Bodhisattva within her womb with all his limbs, lacking no faculty, etc. This too I remember as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Blessed One. Stop here for a moment. This is what I have just read. There are a few things here I find it hard to accept. Like paragraph 7. When the Bodhisattva passed away from the Tusita heaven and descended into his mother's womb, a great immeasurable light surpassing the splendor of the gods appeared in the world. You must remember that the Bodhisattva before enlightenment was like many other beings, even including Aryans. When Aryans are reborn, there's no great immeasurable light appearing in the world. So it's not logical to think that before the Buddha was enlightened, he was already very special. So that's one thing. The other one is in paragraph 8. When the Bodhisattva descended into his mother's womb, 4 young deities came to guard him at the 4 quarters, so that no humans or non-humans or anyone could harm the Bodhisattva or his mother. In the Buddha's Dhamma, we don't need anyone to protect us. What protects us is our karma. We have the blessing. The Buddha says, Kamma sakumhi, kamma dayado, kamma yoni, kamma bandhu, kamma patisarana. Remember the chant. So this is another thing. And then in number 12, paragraph 12, she saw the Bodhisattva within her womb with all his limbs lacking no faculty. How can she see the baby in the womb? She doesn't have X-ray eyes. Now I come to 13, paragraph 13. I heard and learned this from the Blessed One's own lips. 7 days after the birth of the Bodhisattva, his mother died and reappeared in the Tusita heaven. This too I remember as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Blessed One. I heard and learned this from the Blessed One's own lips. Other women give birth after carrying the child in the womb for 9 or 10 months, but not so the Bodhisattva's mother. The Bodhisattva's mother gave birth after carrying him in her womb for exactly 10 months. This too I remember as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Blessed One. I heard and learned this from the Blessed One's own lips. Other women give birth seated or lying down, but not so the Bodhisattva's mother. The Bodhisattva's mother gave birth to him standing up. This too I remember as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Blessed One. I heard and learned this from the Blessed One's own lips. When the Bodhisattva came forth from his mother's womb, first gods received him, then human beings. This too I remember as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Blessed One. I heard and learned this from the Blessed One's own lips. When the Bodhisattva came forth from his mother's womb, he did not touch the earth. 4 young gods received him and set him before his mother, saying, "Rejoice, O Queen! A son of great power has been born to you." This too I remember as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Blessed One. Stop here for a moment. Of these qualities I just read, these few, a bit doubtful. Number 15. Other women give birth seated or lying down, but not so the Bodhisattva's mother. The Bodhisattva's mother gave birth to him standing up. This a bit hard to believe. And then 16. When the Bodhisattva came forth from his mother's womb, first gods received him, then human beings. This also is a bit far-fetched. Number 17. When the Bodhisattva came forth from his mother's womb, he did not touch the earth. 4 young gods received him and set him before his mother, saying, "Rejoice, O Queen! A son of great power has been born to you." So you see here, they say the Bodhisattva's mother was called the Queen. This shows it's a later writing. In the suttas, we know that the Buddha's father was not a king, although he was called Raja Suddhodana. He was just one of many Rajas. Not all Rajas are kings. From the Dhammacettiya Sutta, we know that the Buddha was a citizen of Kosala, and the king of Kosala was Pasenadi. So okay, now 18. I heard and learned this from the Blessed One's own lips. When the Bodhisattva came forth from his mother's womb, he came forth unsullied, unsmeared by water or humus or blood or any kind of impurity, clean and unsullied. Suppose there were a gem placed on kasi cloth, then the gem would not smear the cloth or the cloth the gem. Why is that? Because of the purity of both. So too, when the Bodhisattva came forth from the mother's womb, he came forth unsullied, unsmeared by water or humus or blood or any kind of impurity. I heard and learned this from the Blessed One's own lips. When the Bodhisattva came forth from his mother's womb, 2 jets of water appeared to pour from the sky, one cool and one warm, for bathing the Bodhisattva and his mother. This too I remember as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Blessed One. I heard and learned this from the Blessed One's own lips. As soon as the Bodhisattva was born, he stood firmly with his feet on the ground. Then he took 7 steps north, and with a white parasol held over him, he surveyed each quarter and uttered the words of the leader of the herd. "I am the highest in the world. I am the best in the world. I am the foremost in the world. This is my last birth. Now there is no renewal of being for me." This too I remember as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Blessed One. I heard and learned this from the Blessed One's own lips. When the Bodhisattva came forth from his mother's womb, then a great immeasurable light surpassing the splendor of the gods appeared in the world with its gods, its Maras and its Brahmas. In this generation with its recluses and Brahmins, with its princes and its people, and even in those abysmal world interspaces of vacancy, gloom and utter darkness, where the moon and the sun, mighty and powerful as they are, cannot make their light prevail. There too a great immeasurable light surpassing the splendor of the gods appeared, and the beings born there perceive each other by that light. So other beings indeed have appeared here. And this 10,000 world system shook and quaked and trembled, and there too a great immeasurable light surpassing the splendor of the gods appeared. That when the Bodhisattva came forth from his mother's womb, then a great immeasurable light surpassing the splendor of the gods appeared. This too I remember as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Blessed One. Stop here for a moment. Going back now, I look at paragraph 18. When the Bodhisattva came forth from his mother's womb, he was unsullied, unsmeared by water or humus or blood or any kind of impurity. This is also very hard to believe. You find in all religions that they tend to glorify the founder of the religion. So you find like in the Christian religion, they say that Jesus was born from the Virgin Mother. In the early Mahayana books, they also say the same thing. They say that the Buddha's mother was a virgin, gave birth to him. So this is one of those things. In 19, when the Bodhisattva came forth from his mother's womb, 2 jets of water appeared to fall from the sky to bathe the Bodhisattva and his mother. This is also a bit far-fetched. Number 20, as soon as he was born, he stood firmly with his feet on the ground, took 7 steps, and said, I am the highest in the world, etc. This is also hard to believe. Then 21, when the Bodhisattva came forth from the mother's womb, great immeasurable light surpassing the splendor of God appeared in the world. And not only that, and the 10,000 world system shook and quaked and trembled. So this is also very hard to believe. Yeah. Okay, now 22. That being so, Ananda, remember this too as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Tathagata. Here, Ananda, for the Tathagata, feelings are known as they arise, as they are present, as they disappear. Perceptions are known as they arise, as they are present, as they disappear. Thoughts are known as they arise, as they are present, as they disappear. Remember this too, Ananda, as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Tathagata. Venerable Sir, since for the Blessed One, feelings are known as they arise, as they are present, as they disappear. Perceptions are known as they arise, as they are present, as they disappear. Thoughts are known as they arise, as they are present, as they disappear. This too I remember as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Blessed One. That is what the Venerable Ananda said. The teacher approved. The monks were satisfied and delighted in the Venerable Ananda's words. This last part is Dhamma. For the Tathagata, feelings are known as they arise, as they are present, as it disappears. Similarly for perceptions and thoughts. So it appears like originally this sutta was not so long. Probably they added some of these things. Just like people adding sugar and salt and spice and everything nice. So okay. Since this is not an important sutta, we'll go to the next sutta. 124, Bakkula Sutta. This one also, some of the things here may be a bit... Thus have I heard, on one occasion the Venerable Bakkula was living at Rajagaha in the bamboo grove, a squirrel sanctuary. Then Acchariya Kassapa, a former companion of the Venerable Bakkula in his lay life, went to the Venerable Bakkula and exchanged greetings with him. When this courteous and amiable talk was finished, he sat down at one side and asked the Venerable Bakkula, Friend Bakkula, how long is it since you went forth? It is 80 years since I went forth, friend. Friend Bakkula, in these 80 years, how many times have you engaged in sexual intercourse? Friend Kassapa, you should not ask me such a question as that. You should ask me such a question as this. Friend Bakkula, in these 80 years, how many times have perceptions of sensual desire arisen in you? Friend Bakkula, in these 80 years, how many times have perceptions of sensual desire arisen in you? Friend Kassapa, in the 80 years since I went forth, I do not recall any perception of sensual desire to have ever arisen in me. I stop here for a moment. So what follows in the brackets was added later by later monks, so we won't read that. Now, according to the commentaries to the Majjhima Nikāya, they say that Venerable Bakkula renounced at the age of 80 years old. So since he has gone forth 80 years, he's supposed to be 160 years old. This is a bit hard to believe because the Buddha himself passed away at the age of 80 years at that time. And the Buddha is supposed to have a long life. So it's hard to believe that he was 160 years old. Friend, in the 80 years since I went forth, I do not recall any perception of ill will, any perception of cruelty to have ever arisen in me. This is maybe possible for some people because they might have been a past life Arya. They may not have perception or thoughts of sensual desire, ill will, and perception of cruelty. Friend, in the 80 years since I went forth, I do not recall any thought of sensual desire to have ever arisen in me. Friend, in the 80 years since I went forth, I do not recall any thought of ill will, any thought of cruelty to have ever arisen in me. Friend, in the 80 years since I went forth, I do not recall ever having accepted a robe from a householder, ever having worn a robe given by a householder, ever having cut a robe with a cutter, ever having sewn a robe with a needle, ever having colored a robe with dye, ever having sewn a robe at the Katina time, ever having worked on making robes for my companions in the holy life. I'll stop here for a moment. So, this sutta is trying to say that Venerable Bakkula was a very ascetic monk. He has this wonderful and marvelous quality that he doesn't have thoughts of sensual desire, ill will and cruelty. And then his ascetic, he practices these ascetic practices. So he does not accept a robe from a householder. That means he collects this pangsukula cloth from corpses and all that, and he sews it into a robe. But then if he doesn't sew, here it doesn't say, he doesn't sew a robe also. So how to wear a robe? Without ever having sewn a robe with a needle, that's a bit far-fetched, because a monk every now and then, when his robe gives way, he has to repair his robes, especially during the Buddha's time. So a bit, maybe he's very ascetic, this monk, so they stretch it a bit. Friend, in the 80 years since I went forth, I do not recall ever having accepted an invitation to a meal. This is possible for some monks. Ever having given rise to the thought, oh, may someone invite me to a meal. Ever having sat down inside a house. Ever having eaten inside a house. This is possible for certain ascetic monks. They only want to beg for their food. Just like Venerable Kassapa, he doesn't go to house dana. Friend, in the 80 years since I went forth, I do not recall ever having grasped at the signs and features of a woman. Ever having taught the Dhamma to a woman, even as much as a 4-line stanza, ever having gone to the nuns' quarters, ever having taught the Dhamma to a bhikkhuni, ever having taught the Dhamma to a female probationer, ever having taught the Dhamma to a female novice. This seems a bit far-fetched. Seems like he never talks to a woman or so. Friend, in the 80 years since I went forth, I do not recall ever having given the going forth, ever having given the full ordination, ever having given dependence, ever having had a novice wait on me. Sorry for a moment, that shows he does not accept disciples. He lives alone. Friend, in the 80 years since I went forth, I do not recall ever having bathed in a bathhouse, ever having bathed with bath powder, ever having undertaken the work of massaging the limbs of my companions in the holy life, ever having had an affliction arise in me, even for as long as it takes to milk a cow, ever having taken medicine, even as much as a piece of gallnut, ever having used a bolster, ever having made up a bed, ever having entered upon residence for the rains in a resting place inside a village. Let's stop here for a moment. So here shows that he's very ascetic. He doesn't mix with other monks, so he doesn't do things like what they call in Thailand upatak, like massaging a senior monk or serving other monks and all that. But here he doesn't talk about serving other monks. But you see, he never gets sick at all. Apparently he's a very, very fit monk. But one thing about ascetic monks, because they are very ascetic, they live in the forest, they're very pure lifestyle, they are extremely fit. I've seen some forest monks in Thailand, even though they are older than me, but they at that time when I went to Thailand, at that time when I first went to Thailand, I was 38 years old, and I went on Tudong, how do you say, going on, how do you say, Tudong, Long Pa, how do you say, like going to the forest, with this 45-year-old monk. At that time, I was surprised, he was much fitter than me, being older than me. Well, of course, not that much difference. But like when we walk up the hill, on the level ground, he walks so fast. When he goes up the hill, he doesn't slow down. Just the same speed he goes up the hill. At that time, I was very surprised. Then later, I found that actually the lifestyle of a forest monk makes you very, very fit. Sometimes you get caught in the rain and all that. Now you're sleeping in the forest, you get wet and all that. You don't get sick. Because the mind is strong. When the mind is strong, the body also is strong. Like nowadays, doctors say a lot of people's sickness is mind-made. Friend, for 7 days after going forth, I ate the country's alms food as a debtor. On the 8th day, final knowledge arose. Stop here for a moment. So he went forth on the 8th day. He attained arahanthood. This shows he's somebody with great, what they call paramis, these perfections of character from past life, very probably past life Arya. Then Acchariya Kassapa said, I will receive the going forth in this Dhamma Vinaya. I will receive the full ordination. And Acchariya Kassapa received the going forth in this Dhamma Vinaya. He received the full ordination. Stop here for a moment. So even though this friend, Acchariya Kassapa, asked Venerable Bakkula to be ordained, but Venerable Bakkula, as we read earlier, he does not ordain anybody, so probably he brought him to other monks to ordain. And soon, not long after his full ordination, dwelling alone, withdrawn, diligent, ardent and resolute, the Venerable Kassapa, by realizing for himself with direct knowledge, here and now entered upon and abided in the supreme goal of the holy life, for the sake of which clansmen rightly go forth from the home life into homelessness. He knew directly, birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived, what had to be done has been done, there is no more coming to any state of being. And the Venerable Kassapa became one of the Arahants. Stop here for a moment. So this Acchariya Kassapa was very impressed by his friend's description of his various wonderful and marvelous qualities. So impressed that he asked to ordain. And he ordained, and a few years later, probably he became an Arahant. Then on a later occasion, the Venerable Bakkula took a key and went from cell to cell. Here, cell to cell means room to room, the kutis, saying, come forth, Venerable Sirs, come forth, Venerable Sirs. Today I shall attain final Nibbana. Then seated in the midst of the Sangha of monks, the Venerable Bakkula attained final Nibbana. So, being Arahant was well cultivated. When his time came to enter Nibbana, he knew when he was going to enter Nibbana, so he informed the monks. So they came to see him, and he attained final Nibbana. According to the commentaries, he's a type of monk who does not want to trouble other monks. So he entered, when he was about to pass away, he entered into the fire casino, meditated on fire, and used that fire to light his body, cremate his body, so all remained was ashes. It's possible for some Arahants who have this, this is one of the psychic powers. Now we come to an important sutta. Those two suttas are not important. 125, Dantabhumi Sutta, the great of the tamed. One of the suttas I like very much. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Rajagaha in the bamboo grove, the squirrel sanctuary. Now on that occasion, the novice Acchariya was living in a forest hut, or kuti. Then Prince Jayasena, while wandering and walking for exercise, went to the novice Acchariya and exchanged greetings with him. When this courteous and amiable talk was finished, he sat down at one side and said to the novice Acchariya, Master Agivesana, I have heard that a monk who abides here diligent, ardent and resolute can achieve unification of mind, or one-pointedness. And the novice said, that is so, Prince, that is so. A monk who abides here diligent, ardent and resolute can achieve unification of mind. It would be good if Master Agivesana would teach me the Dhamma as he has heard it and mastered it. And the novice said, I cannot teach you the Dhamma, Prince, as I have heard it and mastered it. For if I were to teach you the Dhamma as I have heard it and mastered it, you would not understand the meaning of my words, and that would be wearying and troublesome for me. And he said, let Master Agivesana teach me the Dhamma as he has heard it and mastered it. Perhaps I can understand the meaning of his words. I shall teach you the Dhamma, Prince, as I have heard it and mastered it. If you can understand the meaning of my words, that will be good. But if you cannot understand the meaning, then leave it at that, and do not question me about it further. Let Master Agivesana teach me the Dhamma as he has heard it and mastered it. If I can understand the meaning of his words, that will be good. If I cannot understand the meaning, then I will leave it at that, and I will not question him about it further. Stop it for a moment. So here this novice, he's not very confident of teaching the Dhamma. So he told this, at first he didn't want to teach, but this prince persisted, asked him a second time. So he said, okay, I'll teach you. But don't ask me more than what I say. Then the novice Acchariya taught Prince Jayasena the Dhamma as he has heard it and mastered it. After he had spoken, Prince Jayasena remarked, "It is impossible, Master Agivesana. It cannot happen that a monk who abides diligent, ardent and resolute can achieve unification of mind." Then having declared to the novice Acchariya that this was impossible and could not happen, Prince Jayasena rose from his seat and departed. Soon after Prince Jayasena had left, the novice Acchariya went to the Blessed One. After paying homage to the Blessed One, he sat down at one side and reported to the Blessed One his entire conversation with Prince Jayasena. When he had finished, the Blessed One said to him, "Agivesana, how is it possible that Prince Jayasena, living in the midst of sensual pleasures, enjoying sensual pleasures, being devoured by thoughts of sensual pleasures, being consumed by the fever of sensual pleasures, bent on the search for sensual pleasures, could know, see or realize that which must be known through renunciation, seen through renunciation, attained through renunciation, realized through renunciation? That is impossible." Now stop here for a moment. So the Buddha says, there's no point talking to somebody like Prince Jayasena who enjoys sensual pleasures, is devoured by sensual pleasures, consumed by the fever of sensual pleasures. Such a person, he cannot realize, cannot understand what must be realized or understood through renunciation. So you can see here, it's very clear what the Buddha says, is that unless we renounce sensual pleasures, give up the things of the world, it's not possible to practice the holy life. This contradicts the later Mahayana and Tibetan teachings. Mahayana and Tibetan teachings which cropped up later, they say it's possible to be a worldly person and achieve higher states than the Arahant, as I mentioned, Vimalakirti Sutra and all that. Suppose, Agivesana, there were two tameable elephants, horses or oxen that were well tamed and well disciplined, and two tameable elephants, horses or oxen that were untamed and undisciplined. What do you think, Agivesana? Would the two tameable elephants, horses or oxen that were well tamed and well disciplined, being tamed, acquire the behavior of the tamed? Would they arrive at the grade of the tamed? Yes, Venerable Sir. But would the two tameable elephants, horses or oxen that were untamed and undisciplined, being untamed, acquire the behavior of the tamed? Would they arrive at the grade of the tamed, like the two tameable elephants, horses or oxen that were well tamed and well disciplined? No, Venerable Sir. So too, Agivesana, it is impossible that Prince Jayasena, living in the midst of sensual pleasures, enjoying sensual pleasures, being devoured by thoughts of sensual pleasures, being consumed by the fever of sensual pleasures, bent on the search for sensual pleasures, could know, see or realize that which must be known through renunciation, seen through renunciation, attained through renunciation, realized through renunciation. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying, before a person can behave like a tamed and disciplined person, he must undergo this process of training and taming, just like monks undergo. So a person who is very worldly, he cannot realize what renunciant can realize. Suppose, Agivesana, there were a high mountain not far from a village or town, and two friends would leave the village or town and approach the mountain hand in hand. Having reached it, one friend would remain below at the foot of the mountain, while the other would climb to the top. Then the friend who remained below at the foot of the mountain would say to the friend who stood at the top, "Well, friend, what do you see standing on top of the mountain?" And the other replied, "Standing on top of the mountain, friend, I see lovely parks, lovely groves, lovely meadows, and lovely ponds." Then the first friend would say, "It is impossible, friend. It cannot happen that while standing on top of the mountain, you should see lovely parks, lovely groves, lovely meadows, and lovely ponds." Then the other friend would come down to the foot of the mountain, take his friend by the arm, and make him climb to the top of the mountain. After giving him a few moments to catch his breath, he would ask, "Well, friend, standing on top of the mountain, what do you see?" And his friend would reply, "Standing on top of the mountain, friend, I see lovely parks, lovely groves, lovely meadows, and lovely ponds." Then the other would say, "Friend, just a little earlier we heard you say, it is impossible, friend. It cannot happen that while standing on top of the mountain, you should see lovely parks, lovely groves, lovely ponds. But just now we heard you say, standing on top of the mountain, I see lovely parks, lovely groves, lovely ponds." Then the first friend would reply, "Because I was obstructed by this high mountain, friend, I did not see what was there to be seen." So too, Agivesana, Prince Jayasena is obstructed, hindered, blocked, and enveloped by a still greater mass than this, the mass of ignorance. Thus it is impossible that Prince Jayasena, living in the midst of sensual pleasures, enjoying sensual pleasures, being devoured by thoughts of sensual pleasures, being consumed by the fever of sensual pleasures, bent on the search of sensual pleasures, could know, see, or realize that which must be known through renunciation, seen through renunciation, attained through renunciation, realized through renunciation. Stop here for a moment. So this second example the Buddha gave, simile, that the person at the bottom of the mountain, he cannot see so clearly like the person on top of the mountain. This reminds me, just like some people, they have not attained the jhanas, and they practice vipassana meditation, and they belittle the jhanas. They say there's no more mindfulness in the jhanas. They say in the state of jhana you cannot have wisdom because it's like in the trance state. You cannot use your mind at all. It's just like this simile. You have to go up to the top of the hill before you can know. So it's the same. Until that person attains the jhanas, he doesn't know the mind. When after the person has attained the jhanas, he's rid of the hindrances, so you see much clearer than a person with the hindrances. So the person with the hindrances practicing vipassana meditation is like somebody, he looks all around and he sees he can see a clear view of everything. But the view that he sees is not as clear as a person up the mountain. It's a different view at all. So here the Buddha says Prince Jayasena is obstructed, hindered and blocked by the mass of ignorance. He doesn't know the Dhamma, he hasn't practiced the Dhamma, he hasn't trained in the Dhamma. So he's an untamed person, untrained and untamed. How can he attain what has to be attained through renunciation? Agivesana, if these two similes had occurred to you, in reference to Prince Jayasena, he would have spontaneously acquired confidence in you, and being confident would have shown his confidence to you. And the novice said, "Venerable Sir, how could these two similes have occurred to me in reference to Prince Jayasena as they occur to the Blessed One, since they are spontaneous and have never been heard before?" And now the Buddha is going to give a simile of a forest elephant, which is a very beautiful simile. Suppose Agivesana, a head-anointed noble king, addresses his elephant woodsman thus: "Good elephant woodsman, mount the king's elephant, enter the elephant wood, and when you see a forest elephant, bind him by the neck to the king's elephant." Having replied, "Yes, sire," the elephant woodsman mounts the king's elephant, enters the elephant wood, and when he sees a forest elephant, binds him by the neck to the king's elephant. The king's elephant leads him out into the open. It is in this way that a forest elephant comes out into the open, for the forest elephant clings to the elephant wood. Then the elephant woodsman informs the head anointed noble king, "Sire, the forest elephant has come out into the open." The king addresses his elephant tamer thus, "Come, good elephant tamer, tame the forest elephant, subdue his forest habits, subdue his forest memories and intentions, subdue his distress, fatigue and fever over leaving the forest. Get him to take delight in the town, inculcate in him habits congenial to human beings." Having replied, "Yes, sire," the elephant tamer plants a large post in the earth and binds the forest elephant to it by the neck in order to subdue his forest habits, subdue his forest memories and intentions, subdue his distress, fatigue and fever over leaving the forest, and get him to take delight in the town, inculcate in him habits congenial to human beings. Then the elephant tamer addresses the elephant with words that are gentle, pleasing to the ear and lovable, as go to the heart, are courteous, desired by many, and agreeable to many. When the forest elephant is addressed by such words, he listens, gives ear, and exerts his mind to understand. The elephant tamer next rewards him with grass fodder and water. When the forest elephant accepts the grass fodder and water from him, the elephant tamer knows, now the king's elephant will live. Then the elephant tamer trains him further thus, "Take up, put down." Then when the king's elephant obeys his tamer's orders to take up and put down, and carries out his instructions, the elephant tamer trains him further thus, "Go forward, go back." When the king's elephant obeys his tamer's orders to go forward and go back, and carries out his instructions, the elephant tamer trains him further thus, "Get up, sit down." When the king's elephant obeys his tamer's orders to get up and sit down, and carries out his instructions, the elephant tamer trains him further in the task called imperturbability. He ties a giant plank to his trunk. A man with a lance in his hand sits on his neck. Men with lances in their hands surround him on all sides, and the elephant tamer himself stands in front of him holding a long lance pole. When the elephant is being trained in the task of imperturbability, he does not move his four legs or his hind legs. He does not move his forequarters or his hind quarters. He does not move his head, ears, tusks, tail or trunk. The king's elephant is able to endure blows from spears, blows from swords, blows from arrows, blows from other beings, and the thundering sound of drums, kettle drums, trumpets and tom-toms. Being rid of all faults and defects, purged of laws, he is worthy of the king, in the king's service, considered one of the factors of a king. I'll stop here for a moment. So you see how they train the elephant until he can stand blows and sounds and all these things. And it mentioned in some other suttas, he'll be even willing to give up his life for his trainer. This is a well-trained, well-tamed king's elephant. So through Agivesana, a Tathagata appears in the world, Arhan, Sammasambuddha, etc. and teaches the Dhamma, and somebody hears the Dhamma and decides to renounce the home life and shave off his hair and beard, put on the yellow robe and goes forth from the home life into homelessness. It is in this way that a noble disciple comes out into the open. For gods and humans cling to the five cords of sensual pleasure. I stop here for a moment. So you see this simile is so spot on. Just like the forest elephant, he doesn't want to come out of the forest at all. He's so used to the forest. He needs another bigger elephant to force him out of the forest, pull him out forcefully. Then only he will come out. So in the same way, normal human being, so used to the home life, is extremely reluctant to renounce and become a monk. A lot of people, it's impossible that they will give up the home life. So I like this simile very much for this. Then the Tathagata disciplines him further. Come monk, be virtuous, restrain with the restraint of the Patimokkha, be perfect in conduct and resort, seeing fear in the slightest form, train by undertaking the training precepts. When Agivesana, the noble disciple, is virtuous, restrain with the restraint of the Patimokkha, etc. Then the Tathagata disciplines him further. Come monk, guard the doors of your sense faculties. On seeing a form with the eye, do not grasp at its signs and features. Since if you were to leave the eye faculty unguarded, evil, unwholesome states of covetousness and greed might invade you. Practice the way of its restraint. Guard the eye faculty. Undertake the restraint of the eye faculty. Similarly, on hearing a sound with the ear, smelling an odor with the nose, tasting a flavor with the tongue, touching a tangible with the body, cognizing a mind object with the mind, do not grasp at its features and signs and features. Since if you were to leave the faculties unguarded, evil, unwholesome states of covetousness and greed might invade you. Practice the way of the restraint. Guard the faculties. Undertake the restraint of the faculties. When Agivesana, the noble disciple, guards the doors of his sense faculties, then the Tathagata disciplines him further. Come monk, be moderate in eating, reflecting wisely. You should take food neither for amusement, nor for intoxication, nor for the sake of physical beauty and attractiveness, but only for the endurance and continuance of this body, for ending discomfort, and for assisting the holy life, considering, thus I shall terminate old feelings, without arousing new feelings, and I shall be healthy and blameless, and shall live in comfort. When Agivesana, the noble disciple, is moderate in eating, then the Tathagata disciplines him further. Come monk, be devoted to wakefulness during the day, while walking back and forth and sitting. Purify your mind of obstructive states. In the first watch of the night, while walking back and forth and sitting, purify your mind of obstructive states. In the middle watch of the night, you should lie down on the right side in the lion's pose, with one foot overlapping the other, mindful and fully aware, after noting in your mind the time for rising. After rising in the last watch of the night, while walking back and forth and sitting, purify your mind of obstructive states. When Agivesana, the noble disciple, is devoted to wakefulness, then the Tathagata disciplines him further. Come monk, be possessed of mindfulness and full awareness, or mindfulness and recollection. Act in full awareness when going forward and returning, when looking ahead and looking away, and flexing and extending your limbs, and wearing your robes and carrying your outer robe and bowl, and eating, drinking, consuming food and tasting, and defecating and urinating, and walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, waking up, talking and keeping silent. When Agivesana, the noble disciple, possesses mindfulness and full awareness, then the Tathagata disciplines him further. Come monk, resort to a secluded resting place, the forest, the root of a tree, a mountain, a ravine, a hillside cave, a charnel ground, a jungle thicket, an open space, or a heap of straw. Stop here for a moment. So here you see, just like the elephant, he trains one step at a time. So here the Buddha says he disciplines his disciples in the same way. First, they have to keep the precepts. After they renounce, they keep the precepts. Be careful to train to be perfect in conduct and resort. Conduct is there. How they conduct themselves. Resort is where they go to. And then after that, to guard the doors of the sense faculties, the six senses, not to pay too much attention to sight, sound, smells, taste, touch, and thoughts. Then after that, to be moderate in eating, eating only in the morning, not in the afternoon and night, although there are allowances. And then devoted to wakefulness, not to sleep too much, and then to practice mindfulness and recollection, recollecting the four objects of sati, the body, feelings, the mind, and the Dhamma. Then after he has trained for 5 years under a senior monk, then he is allowed to resort to a secluded resting place to live alone. He resorts to a secluded resting place, the forest or the root of a tree, a mountain, etc. On returning from his alms round, after his meal he sits down, folding his legs crosswise, setting his body erect and establishing mindfulness in front of him or before him. Abandoning covetousness for the world, he abides with the mind free from covetousness. He purifies his mind from covetousness. Abandoning ill will and hatred, he abides with the mind free from ill will, compassionate for the welfare of all living beings. He purifies his mind from ill will and hatred. Abandoning sloth and torpor, he abides free from sloth and torpor, percipient of light, mindful and fully aware. He purifies his mind from sloth and torpor. Abandoning restlessness and remorse, he abides unagitated with the mind inwardly peaceful. He purifies his mind from restlessness and remorse. Abandoning doubt, he abides having gone beyond doubt, unperplexed about wholesome states. He purifies his mind from doubt. Having abandoned these 5 hindrances, imperfections of the mind that weaken wisdom, he abides contemplating the body in the body, ardent, fully aware and mindful. Having put away covetousness and grief for the world, he abides contemplating feelings in feelings, mind in mind, Dhamma in Dhamma, ardent, fully aware and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. Just as Agivesana, the elephant tamer, plants a large post in the earth and binds the forest elephant to it by the neck in order to subdue his forest habits, etc., and to inculcate in him habits congenial to human beings. So these 4 intense states of recollection are the bindings for the mind of the noble disciple in order to subdue his habits based on the household life, to subdue his memories and intentions based on the household life, to subdue his distress, fatigue and fever based on the household life, and in order that he may attain the true way and realize Nibbana. I'll stop here for a moment. So just like the forest elephant, after you bring him out of the forest, he is very agitated, he's very distressed. So you have to treat him in the right way, and then only he can get rid of this distress and fatigue and all that. So in the same way, as we read in some earlier sutta, when a monk practices mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of breathing, or any one of these meditations, basically he's practicing the 4 intense states of recollection and the 4 satipatthana, which are useful to subdue the habits based on the household life, to subdue the memories and intentions based on the household life, to subdue the distress, fatigue and fever based on the household life, and in order to attain the true way and realize Nibbana. So here you see, after he gets rid of the 5 hindrances, then he practices this satipatthana. Then the Tathagata disciplines him further. Come monk, abide contemplating the body in the body, but do not think thoughts connected with the body. Abide contemplating feelings in feelings, but do not think thoughts connected with feelings. Abide contemplating mind in mind, but do not think thoughts connected with the mind. Abide contemplating Dhamma in Dhamma, but do not think thoughts connected with Dhamma. With the stilling of applied and sustained thought, he enters upon and abides in the 2nd jhana, the 3rd jhana, the 4th jhana, and when his concentrated mind is thus purified, then he practices the abhinyas, the 3 abhinyas, namely the recollection of his past lives, then seeing beings passing away and being reborn according to karma vipaka. And then the 3rd one is contemplating the Dhamma, so that he attains destruction of the asavas, destruction of the taints. And he understands birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived, what had to be done has been done. There is no more coming to any state of being. Now, this last part, I'd like you to note, is a very important part. Normally, when the Buddha talks about a monk, after he gets rid of the 5 hindrances, he will attain the first jhana, followed by the second jhana, followed by the third jhana, followed by the fourth jhana. So here you find the description of the first jhana is not here. Instead, you have the second jhana, the third jhana, and the fourth jhana. This means that the practice of satipatthana, which is mentioned here, is equivalent to the first jhana. As mentioned in the Satipatthana Samyutta, it is said that if a skillful monk practices satipatthana, his mind must become concentrated. In other words, if a monk practices satipatthana skillfully in the right way, he must end up with the first jhana. Only a person practicing satipatthana in a skillful way, in a wrong way, he cannot attain the first jhana. So here is very obvious. Practicing satipatthana brings one into the first jhana. And from the first jhana, it continues into the second jhana, third jhana, and fourth jhana. So it's very clear, satipatthana has everything to do with jhana. Not like some monks, vipassana monks say that satipatthana has nothing to do with the jhanas. So you see the standard footprints of the Buddha, as is mentioned before, is the 4 jhanas followed by the 3 abhinyas. That is the Bodhisattva path. That monk is able to endure cold and heat, hunger and thirst, and contact with gadflies, mosquitoes, wind, sun, and creeping things. He is able to endure ill-spoken, unwelcome words and arisen bodily feelings that are painful, racking, sharp, piercing, disagreeable, distressing, and menacing to life. Being rid of all lust, hate, and delusion, purge of laws, he is worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of reverential salutations, and unsurpassed field of merit for the world. Now, stop here for a moment. So here you see, after the monk has attained arahanthood, liberation, destruction of the taints, then the Buddha says he has got rid of all the flaws, purge of all the flaws. So he's just like the king's elephant, the well-trained and tamed king's elephant. He can endure blows from the spears, loud sounds, and being stabbed with a knife and all these things. It says blows from spears, blows from swords, blows from arrows, blows from other beings, and the thundering sound of drums, kettle drums, trumpets, and tom-toms. Being rid of all faults and defects, purge of laws, he is worthy of the king. In the king's service, considered one of the factors of the king. So in the same way, the Buddha says when the monk has attained arahanthood, has completed his full training, then he is able to endure all these hardships, cold and heat, hunger and thirst, contact with gadflies, mosquitoes, ill-spoken words, feelings that are painful, disagreeable, menacing to life. Just like the king's elephant, well-trained and well-tamed, there's nothing he cannot withstand. If Agivesana, the king's elephant, dies in old age, untamed and undisciplined, then he is considered an old elephant that has died an untamed death. If the king's elephant dies when middle-aged, untamed and undisciplined, then he is considered a middle-aged elephant that has died an untamed death. If the king's elephant dies when young, untamed and undisciplined, then he is considered a young elephant that has died an untamed death. So too Agivesana. If an elder monk, this is a Thera, dies with his stains undestroyed, then he is considered an elder monk who has died an untamed death. If a monk of middle status, Majjhima Bhikkhu, dies with his stains undestroyed, then he is considered a monk of middle status who has died an untamed death. If a newly ordained monk, Navaka Bhikkhu, dies with his stains undestroyed, then he is considered a newly ordained monk who has died an untamed death. If Agivesana, the king's elephant dies in old age, well tamed and well disciplined, then he is considered an old elephant that has died a tame death. If the king's elephant dies when middle-aged, well tamed and well disciplined, then he is considered a middle-aged elephant that has died a tame death. If the king's elephant dies when young, well tamed and well disciplined, then he is considered a young elephant that has died a tame death. So too Agivesana, if an elder monk dies with his stains destroyed, then he is considered an elder monk who has died a tame death. If a monk of middle status dies with his stains destroyed, then he is considered a monk of middle status who has died a tame death. If a newly ordained monk dies with his stains destroyed, then he is considered a newly ordained monk who has died a tame death. That is what the Blessed One said. The novice Acchariya was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. So you see why I like this sutta so much. The simile is so nice about the elephant, the taming of an elephant, the training of an elephant, just like a monk. And also the conduct or the taming of the monk is listed out here, although it is not complete, as I mentioned before. But most of the training are shown here. The first one not shown here is this contentment. Moral conduct is there, contentment is not there. Guarding the door of the sense faculties is there. Moderation in eating. Devoted to wakefulness, mindfulness and full awareness. What is not here is the seven good qualities, seven sat dhamma. So okay, we can stop here for now and invite comments or questions. One thing, since you have nothing to ask yet, I can mention something. You find a monk who takes the trouble to train in the way the Buddha has taught, especially a monk who goes to live in the forest, in a secluded area, and begs for his food, and undergoes some hardships, especially physical hardships. Then you find, as the years go by, then he's more and more disciplined, more and more well-trained, more and more well-tamed. Whereas you find those that don't go through this process of training or taming, you find their minds are very agitated. Just like we had this Samanera who disrobed. He was so agitated, small things he could not stand. To him was a big thing, but to somebody else it's just a small thing. So the fault is not outside, the fault is inside. The problem is inside. As the Buddha says, all fears arise in the fool, not in the wise man. So a lot of problems arise in the fool because it's inside. So the training is inside basically. So if we take the trouble to train slowly, we go through the grind. We polish ourselves inside.
I think about this, the question asked me, what about some of our city monks who are also considered well practiced? Is that they cannot go through institutions? Would they be able to attain the...
In what sense are they well practiced?
The Dharma,
It depends whether they really practice or not. Firstly, if a monk wants to practice, the city life is not conducive. The Buddha has said, in the earlier sutta we read, a monk who associates with others, who delights in company, who delights in society, not possible for him to attain anything. It's only a monk who either who lives alone or who is aloof. I've heard like in Thailand, there are certain monasteries, they might be town monasteries, but not city, town monasteries, sometimes some small towns. You might have maybe a dozen monks. Out of the dozen monks, you might find one who keeps to himself, who's aloof from others. That is a practicing monk. Restlessness is one of the factors, and really restlessness is only destroyed by the Arahant. So restlessness comes about now because we still feel we want to do something. I don't know whether you noticed the other day I mentioned that this word sankhara, volition, I say can in a way can be considered the creator in the world, because from volition, because we want to do something that makes the chain of events start now. So somebody who is especially attached to the world, there are many things you want to do, many ambitions. That's why in the suttas the Buddha said there are some beings, in fact most beings, we die with a lot of ambitions unfulfilled. There are still a lot of things we want to do. So this volition, this restlessness comes from this volition. We still want to do something. So this restlessness and remorse as a hindrance, when we meditate and go into our mind, then we find the calm and peace is so blissful, so delightful, that we want to go more into our mind. When we can attain the abandonment of the hindrances, so we still have restlessness, but it's no more a hindrance. It is still a factor. We still have the factor of restlessness. It's not a hindrance in the sense that it does not obstruct us so much as to cause us not to see things clearly. So only when we achieve the jhanas and we find the peace and happiness within, that we slowly let go of the world. We want to meditate more if we can. Only thing sometimes out of obligations, out of sense of duty or something, people sometimes want to do this and do that. But otherwise, that person will want to spend his time inside. In which case, that restlessness is even further weakened further. So it has to do with the volition. This restlessness have to do with wanting to do this, do that. That's why sometimes a monk wants to do too much. It's a hindrance. It's a hindrance. But sometimes, like the Buddha says, it's also a duty for a monk who knows the Dhamma and the Vinaya to teach. If a monk who knows the Dhamma Vinaya were to just bliss out every day and refuse to teach, then the sasana, the Buddhist religion would not last. In the Vinaya books, somebody asked the Buddha, are all the Buddhas the same? Then the Buddha said, no, not all some Buddhas are the same. Even though they teach the Dhamma Vinaya, some teach more Dhamma and more Vinaya. Then the sasana lasts longer. Some teach less Dhamma and less Vinaya. The sasana does not last so long. Also, the Buddha said, after he has entered Nibbana, then he depends on later monks to continue the Dhamma Vinaya. So if later monks don't want to do the work of teaching, then the Buddhist religion will be shortened. So now that the Buddha is no more with us, it is the duty of monks who know the Dhamma Vinaya to teach. So of course, if they really understand the Dhamma, they also want to practice. So you got to sometimes compromise.
And the cost of relationship is also due to law. For example, not only the things are not to do with the law. For example, if you have not been
Yes. The restlessness can also be due to sila, doing what should not have been done, what is unwholesome. Doing what is unwholesome is also contributes to this restlessness as a hindrance, or not doing your duty, neglecting to do what should be done. That also, just like in one sutta, somebody asked the Buddha why some people are born in the woeful plains or something like that, and the Buddha says due to commission and omission. Commission, doing something and not doing something. Those people who go to the woeful plains, they do evil deeds, and they neglect to do wholesome deeds, like duties to the family and all that. And people go to heaven also because of commission and omission. People go to heaven because of having done good deeds, skillful deeds, like keeping the precepts, and omitting to do unskillful deeds, unwholesome karma. So that contributes also to restlessness.
The other thing that I believe for duty and respect, for example, if you have people of different cultural strengths, which for our religion is more related to two people, and if you forget that you don't know that the two people you can't control, that you don't agree with that you can't control on people, so it's like that you don't go with that. So compared to holding a graph for a long time, this is more dangerous to the population.
The more dangerous one is to keep the grudge. There's a very beautiful sutta by the Buddha in the Nikāya, where the Buddha talked about the snake that is fierce and venomous. Then there's another snake that is fierce but not venomous, not poisonous. Fierce but not poisonous. And there's another type of snake which is not fierce but poisonous, venomous. And then the fourth type is not fierce and not venomous. So similarly, human beings are also just like these four types of snakes. The first one that is fierce and venomous are those that flare up easily, the temper flares up easily. But if it's venomous, that means the hatred, the anger keeps inside them long. That's very bad. Fierce and blows up easily and also full of hatred inside for a long time. Then the second one, fierce but not venomous. That means he blows up easily, loses his temper easily, but does not keep inside. It's a more harmless person. And then the third time, he is not fierce but venomous. This type of person is dangerous in the sense that they don't blow up, but they keep inside. So they get angry, so you don't know. Like a grudge against you, you don't know. They keep it inside his heart. And the last one is not fierce and not venomous. He doesn't blow his stop easily and he does not keep a grudge inside him. That's the best. So I think the best is a person who has no anger and does not keep inside his heart. The second best, I think, is a person who blows up easily, but does not keep the grudge inside of him. The worst is the one who gets angry, blows up very fast, as well as keep the grudge. This keeping the grudge inside is not so much harmful to others as to harm that person himself. Person, he keeps the grudge inside, the anger and the hatred inside. It's a poison. It's a poison. So it can make him become deranged. I don't know whether you all notice all these people in the mental asylum, Tanjung Rambutan, all have bad temper. All have bad temper. Okay. Shall we end here?